Hey guys, it's Dash Zach back with another review, this time of the Low-Free Hypebass. It's a top tier exotic bike helmet. Just kidding. It's an exotic new shape from Low-Free that looks kind of like a bike helmet, but in reality it's a mouse and it does not skimp on specs at all. It's a unique experience and I had a pretty good time testing it, but is it worth you picking up? Let's find out. So here we have it, the Low-Free Hypebass, and right off the bat you can see how completely unique this shape is. It's not like any mouse you've ever seen before, particularly the side buttons on top of just the crazy shape. It is made of plastic, but it is built also on a magnesium alloy frame, and also, as you can see, as we'll get into later, a very unique skate design here. The company Low-Free is more known for its keyboards, keycaps, and switches, as well as a few other unique mice, mostly for this Low-Free touch mouse that you see here that looks legitimately just like a computer. The mouse is currently only available on Kickstarter and does list an MSRP of $200. You can get the Ghost Special Edition skin, which is a transparent shell, for $120 right now, or the version that I'm testing for $109 on the super early bird. Like I said in the intro, the mouse itself does not skip on specs. It has a 3950 up to 8K polling. It uses the ever popular KL white blade switches, which are very tactile mechanical switches that I thoroughly enjoy using. The mouse also does come with a pretty unique dongle here. It's quite large and it sort of gives off the vibes of a siren you'd have on like a cop car. So I always like the unique touch of a cool dongle. Also got this cool insert when I unbox the mouse, which sort of explains the naming Hypebass, going from high performance at your pace. And with that, let's get into the mouse. Getting into the clicks, again, the switches are KL white blades and they're actually very light and smailable in this, probably medium light actuation, which is surprising for that switch, and I had no problems clicking these consistently. The rebound was very consistent. You can see here there is some pre-travel on both of the clicks, and you can get a lot of post-travel, but again, did not affect me at all in game. Given the shape of this mouse, there's really not a lot of play here. There is a little bit, but given the frame and the design of this mouse, pretty impressive tolerances there. The scroll wheel is very quiet, and the steps are probably medium. You can definitely tell the defined steps are there. The click itself is also medium actuation. If you click it slowly and consistently, there's no issues, but it isn't the most spammable if you're really trying to go as fast as you possibly can. One interesting thing to note is because this is so thin, you might not like it. I personally thought it was a very satisfying feel, and I did like the rubber on this. You can just sort of kind of peel back this rubber, almost wedding ring kind of thing here, but that's not really an issue either. The side buttons are as unique as the rest of the mouse is. Obviously, they're protruding quite far from the shell, and they're easy to locate. There is a decent amount of pre-travel before you actuate on both the front and the back. Once you actuate the switch, there's really no more pushing into the shell at all. It stops immediately. There's a little bit of play here, but it's not really a big deal. A unique aspect to these, given how the mouse is designed and its unique overall shape, is if you kind of pull up on them, they will also actuate the same as if you're pushing in. So depending on how you're gripping the mouse, that does make them much more easy to hit. And they are actually very spammable, and they rebound super well for this very crazy design they have here. Looking at the bottom of the mouse, there's a skate here in the front, a large pad, a skate here in the middle, and then this back skate. The skates were definitely not a detriment to me at all. Not my favorite skates, and I would replace them if I continue to use the mouse with some dots most likely. They were pretty solid as far as stock skates go. Possibly some of the best black PTFE skates that I've used. You can see that's pretty hollow in the back, and I did notice in game and when testing this, it made the mouse a little bit front heavy, as the majority of the components of the mouse are in the front. I didn't really have any issues with performance due to this, but just something to note. As far as coating goes, there may be a slight coating, but to me this was actually a very, very slippery mouse in hand. I had my standard grip tape here, and that was enough most of the time, but due to the shape and the narrow back here, it never felt super secure in my hand. I do wish that the coating was a little bit grippier on this. As far as build integrity goes, it's a pretty impressive engineering job. There's really no side flex at all, no matter where you press on the mouse, which I'm assuming has to do with the magnesium alloy sort of skeleton or frame that the plastic was built around. There's no give here in the front, no give here on the top back if you press. A little bit on this back skate, as you see it's floating, but really this mouse is absolutely rock solid, which again for the open design is very impressive in my opinion. One note on the shape is at first this sort of seemed like an elongated egg to me, but you can see how much flare there is on something like the M-Shows G3 here. And really this mouse is so long, it doesn't feel like an egg to me, or if it does, it feels like one that's just super narrow in the back, and I'll talk about how that performed for me in game in a little bit. I'll be honest, it took me a while to figure out what the heck mice I wanted to show you to compare this shape to, because this is nothing like any other mouse, but I landed on the Attack Shark R5 Ultra, as well as the Viper V3 Pro. Really, I just wanted to give some shape comparisons as far as height and then bottom shape. So this is the R5 Ultra versus the Low-Free Hypebass, and you can see the exact same height. The hump is almost the same location as well. It's a little bit further back on the Low-Free, and the length is also relatively similar. This mouse's length is something that it's hard to quantify because you can measure it, and it can come out to 121, 125 millimeters. It depends on where you're looking on the mouse, but really you just have to have it in hand to really get the full experience of the mouse. I want to flip over to the Viper V3 Pro now. So as you can see here, the Hypebass is a much more lower profile mouse, and the hump is a little bit further forward than that of the Viper V3 Pro. And again, if you look here, I guess the click heights kind of work out to be somewhat similar, but it's hard to quantify here on the Hypace, both with how it slopes down here and as well as how much you can travel these clicks down, or it just depends on where your fingers are on the grip as to how you experience this mouse. Sitting here and looking at the V3 Pro, you can see there are very defined comfort grooves, and that's not something you're really going to get on the low-free Hypace just due to the shape design. I did though want to show the bottom of these mice just to give an idea of how narrow the Hypace is at points. Particularly in the front, it comes back to a very narrow spot where a lot of mice just kind of stay pretty wide in the front. And while giving this comparison, I did notice something that I hadn't fully come to realize, and that if you look at the shape here, there is a very intentional flare out at these two spots on the side of the mouse, and it does have some curvature as you come to this part of the mouse, which would be very nice if your thumb or fingers landed there. Mine does not. The way I grip, my thumb lands just here under the back button, which is right at that more flare out bulbous point of the mouse, which worked fine for me, but may have contributed to some of the grip issues I had. Because this is so narrow and the way I grip it, I lacked back left palm support here. It felt like a little slippage, so depending on how much of the meat of your palm you're sticking the mouse into, you could have a similar issue. If you have more of a straight on, not tilted grip like I do, the mouse could nestle very nicely here and cradle into your hand and give you a very locked on grip, which is an experience I've heard some people having. This mouse also, because it's so low profile, can be pretty darn comfortable for fingertip, because as it tails off so drastically and it gets so low here in the back, it's not really going to interfere with your palm very much, and you really do have to pull in if you really want to lock it in. And I'd be very interested to hear what someone with really large hands and also someone with very tiny hands would end up doing as far as their experience grip wise with this mouse. One more for comparison's sake, as I know a lot of people often complain about how narrow the OP1 gets. You can see that the Hypace is even more narrow at the front and the back of the mouse, and its peak flare out in the middle of the mouse sort of matches that back flare of the OP1. This mouse also comes with a unique, very clearly self-developed WebDriver. It's really well implemented and very modern in its look. You can control the lighting effects of the dongle, as well as the brightness and speed of those lights. Again, this is all basic functionality here for the most part. It's displayed in a very unique way, and I kind of appreciate that with all of these gauges here. You do have your pulling rate, DPI, and debounce time, LD, your standard stuff, ripple, angle, motion. I've been using long distance mode for all of my testing, and that's about it for this very unique, memorable WebDriver. So my experience with this mouse was definitely a unique one. Oh my goodness, that light is bright there on the back. Anyway, just turned the dongle on to show that earlier in the video. And again, as you can see, I just pulled this mouse up backwards because I wasn't paying attention. As far as implementation and performance, this mouse is very, very well done, very well made. I have no complaints in that department. Very impressed with what Low-Free has done here on their first really super serious gaming mouse. If you want something out there, if you want something that's going to perform really well, I give this a hard recommendation. I had no issues with the pulling rate or the sensor performance. One of my base tests for that is if I have Discord, a couple windows open, 3 different dongles plugged in next to it on the desk, is there any interference, or am I running super smooth in game and Kovacs? And I can report back it was super smooth, so it's well implemented there. Also did some testing with Mouse Tester, and nothing really stood out to me that needed to be noted here. I will say what it comes down to most with this mouse is the shape and how you experience that in your hand. For scenarios where I was doing consistent, smooth tracking over time, or where I was holding a locked in grip the entire time, this mouse performed really well. I did pretty decent in static and tracking, and across the board I could perform almost to my standard with this mouse, which is really impressive given the very unique shape that I'm just very much not used to. I will say in game though, I was losing some confidence in tight situations in a game like Fortnite when I was coming down to the end, and that's due to the shape of the back of the mouse, how it tapers down so low and how it's so narrow. It just didn't feel super secure in my palm when I was making micro adjustments when I was moving around, and it didn't feel as locked in as I wanted it to be going into a battle. Again, that might be just how I experience the mouse, and it might not be a problem for you, but I wanted to share my experience in that regard. This is definitely not the perfect mouse for me, but it's super well implemented, and it's definitely worth trying if you are an enthusiast and you want to try a very unique shape that's not been on the market before. Again, very well implemented, no real overall complaints with performance or the mouse, just a unique shape that wasn't quite perfect for how I hold a mouse. For the weight, completely stock. This was advertised at 47 grams, and we see 49.4 grams here on the scale. I feel obligated to give some specific measurements, so we have about 62.9 millimeters here on that back flare that I was talking about earlier. Right as that tapering completes after the flare, we get down to 59.2 millimeters here about in the center of the mouse. And if you're gripping toward the front of the mouse, not quite all the way, but right toward the front, you're actually getting below 50 millimeters, which is insanely narrow. And the back of the mouse, as you can see here, about the same width at 49.4 millimeters, right before we get to the tip of the back of the mouse. And we have the max hump height coming in, rounded up to the advertised 38 millimeters at 37.7 millimeters. So that about sums up for my thoughts on the Low-Free Hypace. I'll be honest, when we first covered this on the Mousecast podcast, I thought this mouse might be kind of a joke and wouldn't perform very well. Boy, was I wrong. It's very well engineered, very well implemented, and it performs at a top tier level. And I'll echo my sentiments earlier in the video. If you're a mouse enthusiast and you want to try top of the line performance in a very unique shape that you've probably never felt before, go ahead and pick this up. It's not going to be for everybody. For the average person who just wants a mouse, who just wants to play games, and they pick up one mouse every few years, probably steer away from this. It's not a very standard shape, and it's a little more on the expensive side once we get out of the Kickstarter phase. But again, my experience overall with this was very positive. Thank you for Low-Free for giving me the opportunity to test this mouse out. They've been very communicative and great to work with. And as with T-Volution, excited to see what they have coming next. If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe and leave a like. Follow me on Twitter at DashJack for my random mouse tweets. Join our Discord server. Check out the Mousecast podcast. And with that, we'll see you.